Good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Sunny. Thank you for coming today for us to talk about mental health literacy and how we can help ourselves and others. So I'm just going to go right into it because the presentation is really set up to sort of talk about what we're going to discuss and what to expect from our time together. So we'll start welcome, and I'll do some introductions. And also in that section, I'll just highlight some of the key points as to how, I view mental health literacy as a topic aligning with high control groups and people who may be involved with cults and, their community and support systems. Then we'll talk directly about mental health literacy, awareness and action that you can take to learn more. And then self-care prioritization. So, I think we're all aware of self-care and self-compassion, but how can we really think about prioritizing that to avoid compassion fatigue? Um, Also, then, just before we say goodbye, how we can stay connected. I also want to note that I can provide the presentation and resources to anyone who would like it. So my contact information is on the board. It will be at the end. And then I have some cards here. So please feel free to connect if you would like any follow-up information. So as mentioned, my name is Sunny. I come from Vermont, the Northeast Kingdom. So I know some people are familiar, if you know Lake Memphremagog in the other part of Quebec. I live on the southern end of that lake. And so this is the second career for me. I have dual master's degrees in leadership and what I call non-clinical psychology, as I was just mentioning. So I don't plan to become a clinician, but I could if I want to. My first career was actually in the entertainment business. So as a little girl, I began training for my Beltway. And through that experience at the age of 22, some of you may have heard I was just mentioning this. I did the Broadway national tour of Annie with the original creative team. So we went to 96 cities in the United States and Canada. And that really changed my life in a variety of ways. But one of the things was that I saw people having once in a lifetime experiences that they've dreamed of and not being able to engage in them fully because of mental health challenges or difficulties in the workplace. So I continued in that space for 8 years, working with Broadway shows and higher education institutions on youth and family programming. And then about 11 years ago, the really unhealthy environments that these young people were in just became too much for me to continue to be a part of. So I moved on and went into studying and moving into my master's degrees. And I came back to Vermont, where I'm from, and I ended up on the ground doing work in human services, in grant management, employment work, substance use and misuse prevention. And then, for all of the, again, difficulties I saw people having, it really went back to their mental health. So over the last decade, I've created sort of this space, and mental health literacy is how I reference it. I'm an untraditional learner. I've come to this work throughout my life because of my own lived experience. As far as high control groups and cults specifically, I'll let you do your own research, but the Northeast Kingdom does have a large cult or high control group. And I'm allowed to just share generally. My partner and our best friend both left high control religions over their lifetime, and because of risk and protective factors that they both experienced, one of them had an easier time, and the other one, will for the remainder of their life have to handle their experiences. So that is a part of my lived experience. Academically, this is a newer topic for me, so I believe everyone is the expert of their own experience. So I look forward to hopefully staying connected with many people I've met here today to continue to learn how I can align these topics, hopefully to be helpful. I'm a millennial through and through. And so that just might tell you a little bit about me, but I'm very happy and thankful to be here at the conference. And, in any presentation I do, I hope it's a conversation. So there'll be opportunities if you want to ask questions throughout or share comments, please let me know. And also my contact information is up here. I will say most at this point of the work that I do on the ground in the US, and connections here in Canada and even outside of those two spaces, um, everything has grant funding attached to it. So the programming I'm going to share later on today, I can connect you to organizations that have it at no cost. And if this is a topic that you're interested in the United States, we have the Mental Health Literacy Collaborative that I'm a member of and an advisor to. And that was inspired by and informed by what's happening on the ground in Canada with the mental health literacy .org. I can't remember it's not collaborative. So there's this work is happening on the ground, and I'm happy to connect you to more resources. So also you'll see that my language kind of shifts throughout because I'm still learning. I took a couple workshops yesterday that even helped me go in and shift some of my language around these topics. So I'd love to learn from you as well, after or even during the training, how you might say things differently. And this really comes from my work in mental health literacy. I also sort of specialize in substance use and misuse supports and suicide pre and postvention. And so in all those communities, it's really important that we use language that is comfortable to people with lived experience. So I'm still learning about that in this space. But really, mental health literacy can help in many different communities. And we're going to talk about it in, more detail, but really reducing stigma and misunderstanding around difficult or sensitive topics, so that we can, take down I would say the feeling of being afraid to address things. And then, if there's a reduction in stigma, then people may be able to seek help in a way that helps them move into a place of recovery. So that's how I see this work going together. And I know some of you here are clinicians and do mental health work. I'd love to just uh, learn from you, who might be doing mental health work, because that's helpful, and I'd love to hear your feedback. So is that there are a couple of clinicians or mental health professionals here, maybe everybody, which is great. So thank you. And if not, I moved into mental health because I felt that I wanted to understand how to get support for myself too. So many of us have lived experience. So mental health literacy, I really view it as the space between the everyday person and clinical supports. Because if we know how to ask for help, or we know how to support people in asking for help, we can gain that help better. I'll just share that in my life with my mental health, I probably started asking for clinical help at 18, and I wasn't properly diagnosed until I was 34 with anticipatory anxiety and what would be chronic PTSD, if that could be diagnosed in the US. And so I was misdiagnosed, mismedicated, and I had access and privilege. So I'm like, what's happening for other people that don't have those things? And even in my family, we just didn't have mental health literacy to know how to talk about this topic. And we believed that the professionals were, helping. And I just unfortunately had a string of professionals that were not great, but I kept seeking help. So empathetic communication, improved confidence in asking for help or having conversations, more knowledge, and just how to engage on these topics. So also, as someone who, currently and has supported people with a variety of different trauma, and everyday mental health challenges, taking care of ourselves is very important. So I've found, even in the last 5 years, when I focused in more on mental health literacy, I know how to set different boundaries for myself while supporting people. I know how to express those boundaries in a way that are met in a more meaningful engagement. So being able to talk about these things allows us to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves too. So also, if someone has not been able to engage with their family, or there have been difficulties in the family, and in my work, historically in domestic violence, in mental health crisis, as well, supporting the family to reunify or heal, can also be a part of. Mental health literacy can lead to how to talk about those things. Also, in reality, sometimes, we have to not engage with people again in our future. And so knowing how to do that in a way that feels healthy to us, or that we can heal through is something important as well. As many of you here are well aware, as someone heals, that can, pull them away from people that maybe part of the relationship is meaningful, but the other part is still unhealthy. And so how do you navigate those different dynamics? And again, so for families, for caregivers, for people who may be moving into any sort of recovery, connection, belonging. Again, for those of you that are Canadian, you're very lucky because there's a lot of amazing work happening in Canada. Has anyone learned from or worked with the Tamarack Institute? So I should also mention, if you connect with me after, I have resource guides that I can share as well for this and in general. But the Tamarack Institute here in Canada is leading the way with uh, to address a loneliness epidemic through belonging. And so also in the States, I'm working specifically on the ground in Vermont, but connecting with other states that are also looking at combating the loneliness epidemic, which can lead to many other health issues. So the Tamarack Institute is a great organization here in Canada to look up for all these topics. All right, so mental health literacy. In each of these sections, I'm going to basically talk generally about the topic, and then I make connections specifically to, high control groups and cults as well. A part of mental health literacy is, understanding our mental health and how to maintain it, how to seek support if that is what someone needs. Not everyone doesn't always need a clinical support, but they may benefit from it. They might not even know what it could offer them. In my 20s, I would tell everybody, I don't need a therapist. I talk to all my friends, and I'm the only one that went into psychology, right? So, because I just didn't understand the different modalities that care could offer me. And then once I learned, gosh, I was able to engage with EMDR, so the eye therapy for trauma. And, I didn't even know that was an option. So understanding what is available and how to seek help, understanding common mental health disorders, and understanding, obviously, stigma reduction. I am very lucky on a day-to-day basis, welcome, to be in a space where people are, professionally, and the people that usually engage with my work are empathetic, do want to reduce stigma. But once in a while, you get out of your bubble and you realize, wow, like there's still a lot of work to be done out there. And so, just really finding ways to understand why people have stigma, where is it coming from, and then we can sort of reduce it. And as I mentioned, language is such a big part of this. And I was just reflecting the other evening on, I was reading like a pop culture article because that's what I read to like calm my mind. And, they used cult like following for, the largest pop star in the world. You can guess who it is. And I imagined through the lens I've been developing that could feel really bad for someone who has had high control experiences or cult experiences, in the same way that when I hear someone say that person's crazy, that person's insane, the weather's bipolar, it really leads to a misunderstanding of what that true experience is. So just thinking about how the world views mental health, I am always thinking about, but also cluing into other, sectors. In suicide prevention, there's a lot of work around the language we use, and in substance use as well. So when I'm turning this mental health literacy lens to, the work everyone is doing over the conference, I'm thinking, how can we change our language so that it's no, I don't know if inclusive is the right word, but stigma reducing. So common signs of mental distress, in a little while when we look at awareness and action, I'm going to share some different trainings that people can take. Some of you may have taken them, but these trainings go into, hours long details of these topics. So just in general, withdrawing, hopelessness, changes in appearance, behavior changes, performance decline, whatever that might look like. When I'm doing this work, I really encourage people to think about a marked shift in someone's behavior, right? In general. And then the additional work allows us to figure out how do we have a conversation with someone about these things. So considering also if someone may go on to be diagnosed, right? We have depression, anxiety. It's still 1 in 5 people will experience anxiety, depression, or a diagnosis. Stress is something that's really interesting. I live now with cortisol disease because I went for so long with undiagnosed mental health difficulties or misdiagnosed. And so that is something that I believe more so now we're going to regularly talk about, the doctors will say stress kills. They don't talk about what that actually means in the body. So that's something that I think, we'll begin to see more of. Of course, trauma is something that the everyday person is grappling with more and more. Substance use and misuse, as I mentioned earlier, bipolar disorder. So when we talk about mental health first aid in a little while, that's a training that for the everyday person goes through these things. I know most of you here have higher education around these topics, and a class like mental health first aid, where it teaches the everyday person more about them, allows them in the same way that we understand like the signs of the flu. We can understand the signs and symptoms that maybe someone needs to see a clinician to talk about these things and not have it be something that they manage on their own. Also in the work that I do, I believe when we think about mental health literacy, someone may not get diagnosed with a long-term, you know, challenge. They might have, challenges in the moment or for a period of time. So, that can look like these different topics. As I mentioned as well, for my family members that have left high control religious groups, the personal growth part, as I said earlier, is wonderful for them. And it's also challenging as they, continue on and reflect back on what their experiences were. And also, I'll just call it is 4th of July and I'm an American and I'm here. But I know there's a couple other of you, current events constantly, right? It's just we're constantly grappling with what's happening. And so that could be what is affecting someone's mental state now as well. So when we think about all of those things, right, they may come up in specifically in cult systems and high control groups. So, again, I know that you all here, many of you may be the experts on these things. So, when we're thinking about it, it if the everyday person has mental health literacy, it goes quick. Wow, thank you. If the everyday person has a stronger mental health literacy, they may be able to notice these things in a different way than if they don't have a mental health literacy, right? So I was in a somewhat long-term domestic violence relationship in my 20s, of relationship that had domestic violence as a part of it. And, my parents weren't really able to notice it as it was. I certainly didn't notice it. But they weren't necessarily able to notice it as it was beginning. At the height of it, they were able to step in and support me leaving, but that was things were already out of control at that point. So, I've done a lot of learning with my parents as well on these topics. And again, for anyone that came in a little bit after we got going, my information is several places, and I'm happy to share the presentation and the references and follow-up guides as well. So awareness and action, for all the work that I do, I really think about the medical model prevention continuum. So I call it Peter. How can we be thinking about preventing difficulties? How can we intervene in a healthy way? In Vermont and New England, we're adding in harm reduction along with treatment, because that may be something that would allow people to have conversations about moving into treatment and recovery. So I apply this in my suicide prevention work, in my substance use work, in my mental health literacy work. I'm always thinking about how this continuum plays a part of all parts of it. Because really, actually, if I go back, many people start thinking about recovery once someone is prevention once someone is moving into recovery, right? And so we really want to be thinking about that earlier. So accessing care specifically to people who may be in high control groups, right? There's maybe a lack of clinicians that have education around this topic. There may be delayed help seeking as someone, grapples with what has happened to them or what they've been a part of. Barriers to accessing care, right? These are sort of the not great things that come along with helping someone get help. But we have to sort of understand what barriers are so that we can move past those barriers. I believe with a lot, if not all of the work that I do, that connection and referrals and getting, to know what different people offer. We were just chatting about my connections I have in Connecticut. So, I think if you know people that are interested in certain topics or have worked in certain topics, they can be a resource to connect to, clinical supports or other situations that have been, I guess, helpful for people. And I should note that for all this work that I do, I have connections across the US in every state and also in Canada on the ground. I'm doing some work with 3 different African countries, which is kind of random considering I'm from New England. But all of everything we're going to talk about now is available across the globe. So depending on where you're located, I can make connections for you in different countries as well. So lifelong learning for mental health literacy, I'll talk briefly about some of those topics on the top. Again, I don't necessarily think that, at least for me, anyone can be an expert in any one of these because the language is changing all the time. But I think that's a part of being on top of it, is understanding that these topics shift and grow. Has anyone ever heard of mental health first aid or taken a mental health first aid class? Okay, so yeah, wonderful. So a mental health first aid actually is celebrating its 25th year. It is from Australia. So uh I just wanted to check on the time. We go till 10:10, right? Okay, great. I was just making sure. Thanks. So mental health first aid comes from Australia and it's now in 23 countries, and we'll see a little bit more in a little bit. What about QPR, which is a suicide prevention training? So question, persuade, refer. That looks at toxic stress and how that can lead to thoughts of suicide. And then this is a program I've developed over the last 5 years, which is brings in themes of all these topics, but really looks at communication styles. So, what about motivational interviewing? Yeah, okay, great. So that's a wonderful skill set. Vanessa, are you familiar with motivational interviewing?
I know about it.
Okay,
I haven't taken it.
okay, yeah, I know you have a wealth of knowledge. So this is a tool that I think is helpful for anybody communicating, but specifically if you're trying to help someone make change, right? Are you trained in it? Are you a coach?
I mean, no, I'm not.
Okay.
I've taken classes.
Great, yeah.
About it, but
Yeah.
tonight was a addiction.
Yes, wonderful. So yes, that's so I actually, not wonderful, but yeah. Sometimes I say great and I'm like, it's not really great, but you know what I mean. So motivational interviewing, employment work, substance use and misuse. And I imagine that there are professionals that you would utilize it in supporting someone in leaving a high control group, but that this was definitely offers you tools to help someone make a major change in their life. And you learn like 10 to 20 different, communication tools that you can use. Emotion coaching is similar to motivational interviewing, but it's for youth. So it's an adult child communication skill set. And that is created by the Gottman Institute, who started doing couples work in counseling. And then media and digital literacy, right? I think these are things that we need now more than ever, maybe, but historically, right, there always needed to be media literacy. There was a point in time where people thought the novel and the newspaper were going to change the world for the worst, right? Because it was spreading information faster than it had been before. So these are topics I'm moving into now. And I think the digital literacy part of it is very interesting. In a workshop I was in here yesterday, helping people understand like how their devices are tracking them, how someone may be engaging with them with their device, right? Location services. So I think that that's obviously a space that will continue to grow as well. So mental health first aid, how many people, so if you don't mind, and you don't have to raise your hand at all, but how many people here are located in the US? Okay, so a couple, and then Canada for everyone else. So mental health first aid is available in both states. Sorry. Oh gosh, that was a major. Sorry, I'm not trying to get Canada to be a state. That was a big blunder. In both countries. No, I am not. I'm not on that side of things. I apologize. So in all the states in the US, there are grants to cover mental health first aid. So I'm happy to connect you to services in Vermont. And then Canada also has Wellness Works Canada. And then actually the health department funnels funding into different organizations offering mental health first aid at no cost. So uh mental health first aid is about a 6 to 8 hour mental health training class that is comparable to CPR. So it teaches the everyday person to recognize signs and symptoms and then teaches them an action plan as to how to engage with someone, maybe encouraging appropriate professional help or again, just self-help. So this is a great training for clinicians to take to understand, I think, what is available for the everyday person and for the everyday person to be able to have conversations. So this is something I've been very passionate about because again, when I think back, to trauma in my life and the life of those close to me, in the very beginning of it, there was just no way to communicate about these topics. So question, persuade, refer. This is a suicide prevention training that looks at how toxic stress leads to thoughts of suicide. And this is also an international training. This is only 2 hours and it is available in Canada and the US. And so I think what I like about this is it begins to open a conversation up about letting people talk about thinking about not wanting to be alive, which then creates a space where maybe they can get help to move into a hopeful place. In Vermont, I'm doing work with a gentleman named Dave Melnick, and he highlights the importance of imagination and healing. If you can imagine what your life could look like, if you can have that, for me, I use the word hope, but if you can use imagination to future vision for yourself, then you could get somewhere maybe close to that, or at least away from where you might be. So I'm very interested in that kind of view. This is the program that I've been developing. So this is really focused again on motivational interviewing and different communication styles. I go into organizations and I also teach general classes, just having people think about how they're recognizing if something may be happening for someone in their life that is not necessarily positive, and how to engage with them around that topic, and then how to support them in taking next steps towards making a choice that might help them feel better. It's very general because some of these other programs are so specific. So with mental health first aid, in general, it's very well received. But I taught a class recently to classroom educators that have a lot of violence in their classroom, and they left feeling like it wasn't helpful to them because it doesn't go into physical intervention and maybe more difficult spaces in the classroom. So some of them can be personalized, but not all of them. I'm setting this up to be able to be very personalized. And storytelling. I know that there have been workshops this week around storytelling. This leads to that idea of if we can imagine a different pathway forward for ourselves, then maybe we can build it. So I work with Living Proof Advocacy, which is an international organization, as a storytelling coach, but they utilize the science of storytelling to help people advocate personally, to help advocate for a topic, what maybe it's with the government or in their community. I feel that in many parts of our life, especially for those of you that are here, we're always advocating. I'm advocating today to, think about mental health literacy, but really looking at the science of how you can tell a well-crafted story. And this training this work also offers how to take care of yourself. I think it was either yesterday, I don't have my schedule. I couldn't go to it, but I was excited, just how to safely tell your story so that you are not adding further harm to yourself or the topic. And that's built right into this work. All right. So self-care prioritization, because obviously, if we're doing this work, we may have some lived experience, or maybe we have a lot of lived experience around the topic. So as I mentioned earlier, I think it's important to think about how we prioritize our self-care. And if you are supporting someone or you are, a clinician that's supporting someone that is helping someone that is in a high control situation or is cult involved, the compassion fatigue is a real thing, both for those that are maybe receiving services if you're a clinician or for you if you're the caregiver. As we mentioned earlier, chronic stress affects all parts of the body, and right, that idea of isolation and that loneliness, making sure that we're thinking about how to have healthy connections to combat that. So again, as many of you here are professionals or maybe students, we understand self-care and self-compassion, but I think it's important that we practice it as well. So I use the wellness wheel as a framework. Is anyone familiar with the wellness wheel? So that's the official title of it. It was created in the 70s, and we'll look well, actually I don't think I have the wellness wheel in this specifically, but there's 8 to 12 different dimensions. And I do workshops, and I do have information I can share with you around the wellness wheel, but you really look at these different dimensions of your life, and it also is a wonderful tool to use with people you may be supporting, and you identify, where am I doing well with my wellness and where maybe do I need some more work. And I think that it really is helpful because it breaks down wellness and care, and self-compassion can feel like really big topics. And if you're not feeling well, or you are involved in a situation that is, traumatic, it can be really hard to put yourself first. So I like the wellness wheel because it helps me see, okay, I'm doing good in these areas. These are the areas I want to maybe work on. And that just helps with, feeling, giving myself some positive affirmations. Also making sure that we're noticing when we need to take care of ourselves, uh, you know, knowing, and that goes into other work that I do around boundaries. Nidra Tawwab Glover, has anyone followed her work at all? So Nidra Tawwab Glover, and she's in my resource guide. She has a lot of wonderful work around boundaries, and also how do you practice boundaries when you are helping someone that may be experiencing, a difficult, traumatic time in their life when they need your support, but you also need to set healthy boundaries for yourself. So there's a lot of great work there. And then just again, helping people recognize when possible how to ask for support, and how to engage with it. I have an audio essay coming out this summer, or I guess it came out last week, with my experiences as now I guess I would be called, I just learned this, a suicide thought survivor, because I didn't attempt suicide, but I thought about suicide. And a big part of my story was like actually getting over the hump and telling people that I needed to figure out how to get help for it, because for so long I kept it like private. So helping people get over the stigma of sharing things so that they can move even towards considering help. So this is, oh, here we go. Great. I did put some more information on the wellness wheel. These are just a couple of them. The wellness wheel I work with has 8 dimensions, but there are some that have up to 12. And one of them that might be something to pay attention to in this space would be the spiritual wellness and social wellness, right? Because for people who might be in high control religions, or for people that might be in socially joining high control groups, like how are they how can their wellness be looked at through those lenses. And then so self-compassion is how we're going to combat compassion fatigue. This comes from the Compassion Institute, which is a wonderful organization, a global organization that helps cultivate compassion. So things that we can do to take care of ourselves, right? For me, it's always really reducing my workload. I'm a recovering people-pleasing perfectionist, and working makes me feel comfortable. So really for me, especially now moving into my 40s, it's how can I continue to do the work I'm passionate about, recognizing that I've chosen a path that it doesn't always give me a chance to step away because of the people in my personal life. So coming to Quebec, not for a conference, but also, finding those things that allow us to reduce our workload, be connecting to our values. I did a wonderful exercise at a recent workshop I went and got to participate in, and it was really looking at living your values and having them involved in your life. That idea again of reaching out and getting support for ourselves. And again, I do a lot of work around boundaries because I think that that's very important across the board. So learning, turning learning into action. I hope that you will have been able to leave today with some new ideas of classes you might take or programs you might look into for not only supporting yourself, but the people that you're supporting. And please, my information will be up on the screen in a moment, but I really, I would say my top passion is connecting people to resources and to opportunities. So across the US, I have some strong partners here in Canada and again in other countries too. So I hope that I'll be able to, this will just be the beginning of a conversation with several of you. So thank you so much. I know there's a lot of great workshops. I appreciate you coming today. And yeah, I'm happy to hang out for a little while and also clear the way for the next presenter. So thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.